So today's topic is every lawyer's dream or nightmare, risk. So let's start with Todd. So Todd, I understand that you're joining us from Phoenix, where I understand the temperatures topped 110 degrees for several days in a row. Hopefully your air conditioning's keeping up, Todd.
Yeah, not too bad. It's been a record year of high temperatures, so it's a little bit miserable here, but we're used to it. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so also on the panel today is Ellen Nendorf, founder of LPM Executive. Ellen works with corporate legal departments to establish and improve the legal operations functions. She covers everything from process improvement to technology rollout and optimization to help the legal department work most effectively with the resource they have available. Welcome, Ellen.
Thanks, Hiro.
So, Ellen, let's get started. Lawyers have always been concerned with risk. Is there more risk in a COVID world, or are people just more concerned?
I think both is a fair answer there. I mean, the past 5 years, every time I've talked with general counsel or been at roundtables like this, risk is top priority. How do we manage risk? And really, it's not what you can see, the risk that you can see that is driving this theme. It's what is unknown. So what is out there that you can't see? And a lot of that can happen when there are holes in the contracting process. So you really cannot manage what you can't see. And it's that kind of thing that is keeping general counsel up at night. And with everyone moving remote with COVID, you can see even less. And in particular, with a manual contracts process, if you're relying on walking a contractor on for signature or Xeroxing or scanning documents in for signature, you are really, really feeling that pain in this COVID space. And so now really is the time, if you do not have a tool like this to help keep an eye on contracts, you are feeling that pain in particular. There was a recent Bloomberg article where the top AmLaw 100 firms put out resources to help with contract management in the wake of COVID's initial stay-at-home orders, and 89 of the top 99 law firms, their step one in these resources was find your contracts. And if you stop and think about that for a minute, if we're assuming that because of these manual processes, a lot of companies don't even know where the contracts is, what you've seen in COVID then is, how do we know what we need to cancel? How do we know where we're not able to perform as we were contractually obligated to do so, and what repercussions does it have down the road? So both there is more risk because of that, and then also the concern is there because it's more in your face that there are holes in this process that are really opening up the company for risk.
Great, thank you. So Todd, I know you implemented a CLM system prior to the pandemic, so I'd be curious to know how that system is helping you now that everyone's working from home. And maybe start by giving a little background about your company and what prompted you to look for a CLM system.
Yeah, sure. We're a multinational semiconductor manufacturing company based out of the Netherlands. We've got about 3,000 employees around the world, heavily in Asia, Europe, Middle East, and U.S., of course, where I am. Relatively small legal department. We have 4 attorneys at this point worldwide, so spread around the world. Obviously, the semiconductor business is pretty good at the moment, especially with all this online stuff. We're selling lots, our customers are selling a lot of servers and things like that to keep this all going, work at home. So we have a growing number of contracts. It keeps going up every year. And of course, we always have budgets and can't hire a bunch more attorneys or support staff. So we were just looking for a relatively simple, user-friendly contract management system to handle this huge number of contracts. Really started out with NDAs. That's probably 90% of our contracts that we enter each year. Maybe they're not the most important ones, but important to keep things safe and they have to be entered into basically with all our suppliers and all our customers. When I started 20 years ago, you could do all this with Excel sheets and try to keep up with everything. It's just that, 4 or 5 years ago that we couldn't do it anymore. We weren't able to keep up, like Ellen said, with cancellations, reminders, contracts that should have been canceled years ago. Now we have this system in place to do that. We also needed the ability for our end users to create their own contracts. We shouldn't have highly paid attorneys creating NDAs every day or looking up NDAs every day. So we really wanted something that would, use our own template, of course. The end users around the world can log into the system, do everything themselves, and we can just approve it on our end. Really, we're kind of a unique business. We're a Dutch company, so we have subsidiaries around the world and a lot of different business units around the world, and we needed a contract management system that we could adapt and customize to our unique structures and approval processes and things like that.
So, Ellen, what are those highly paid attorneys struggling with?
Yeah, I mean, there are kind of four big things that come to mind here. You've got a remote workforce, and to Todd's point, with these global companies, you may have had a remote workforce in part to begin with, but now everybody's remote, and so you need a real-time platform where everyone can collaborate, so you don't have someone wasting time on version 3 when someone else has already had on version 5, and just really the communication piece as well too. It's much harder when everyone is in their own place. You can't just pop your head over the cubicle wall and ask, hey, what's the status on that contract, or where are we with this? You really need to have a central place to give that visibility and transparency. So remote workforce is a big one. Time, Todd mentioned this too, right? You really can't have an attorney spending time on NDAs all the way. There are better ways now. There are ways to automate that and automate that in a way that's not opening you up for risk and ensuring everyone's following the rules on what you can agree to in an NDA. And there's, of course, more use cases than the NDA, but that's such an obvious one that I think every company can relate to. Also, budget cuts, so kind of among those same themes of time, there's not money for more attorneys. Again, as Todd pointed out, really, you've got to be a good steward of the money that you're spending, so canceling those contracts that need to be canceled, trimming the fat, if you will, for those. And then that all kind of comes together with performance limitations too. So knowing what you have to do, being able to easily understand what the company needs to do to fulfill business obligations, and then what you can push to the side or hedge up elsewhere. So really just the challenges are that transparency and visibility, and then just time and money, really summed up.
So Todd, you actually have a CLM system in place. Are you realizing some of the benefits or mitigating some of the risks that Ellen talks about?
Yeah, absolutely. We've having the automated process has helped us in a number of ways. I think the COVID lockdown has really kind of been the first instance of seeing what happens when how this can help us. When COVID hit, the global supply chain was immediately impacted. We're part of that, and our suppliers are part of that, and our customers are part of that. We have Agiloft, a CLM system in place, was critical. It allowed us to quickly support the manufacturing, procurement, sales organizations to figure out what our options were. We were able to quickly pull all the contracts and see what's in there, and then send force majeure notices as needed to our customers, and see what happens with their suppliers when we're engaging with them, see what the contractual obligations are. As we're using standard templates and approved language, that of course helps reduce the compliance risk. We were able to quickly, we quickly determined that our force majeure clause standard language didn't necessarily always include pandemics and everything else, like Airbus had that same issue. We were able to quickly update all those across the board and make sure that language was better to make sure we're covering pandemics, epidemics, and things like that, and other type of government shutdowns. Similarly, we also in the semiconductor area, we're dealing with a lot of export control issues. U.S. and China trade war, all the suppliers are being put on blacklists and things like that. So we also, at the same time, we just updated all our export compliance language in all our sales contracts and supplier contracts, just to make sure that we had options. If the U.S. government says we can't ship something, then we shouldn't have to ship something per the contract. So we have to have an out there. Like I said, I mean, having a central depository is very important. Everybody's at home now. Most people are at home now. So sales, procurement, everybody can get in there internally and see which contracts they have access to, and find out right away what we have in place with each customer. Automated reminders, of course, are very important for all the approvals, the expiration dates, and so on, and other compliance aspects, just to make sure things don't fall through the cracks. I mean, before we had the process in place, it really wasn't possible to keep track of NDAs expiring and things like that. Just a few people. Reports and dashboards are nice to have. Send out quarterly or annual or monthly reports, see what's in there. We also have a lot of instances where we're flagging very risky clauses. Maybe we had to agree to them with the customer, but we want to flag that with our my management or our upper management, just so we know it's in place and that we have to comply with those. And I'm sure we'll talk more about it, but electronic signature has really been the godsend of lately. Everybody's at home. They might not even have a scanner at home, things like that. So being able to send things electronically around the globe pretty much instantaneously has been really helpful. We've been doing that for a few years, but it's really more and more people, of course, want to use that for their day-to-day tasks. I guess, one other, we recently had internal audits, and that was much easier, having an audit trail for your contracts, see who's approved the contracts in the system, both in Agiloft and DocuSign. It really helps to not have to dig up emails of email approvals. You can just give the internal auditor access to what they need in the CLM system, and they can just go about their work and ask a few questions later.
So electronic signatures, are they pretty much nowadays hold the equivalent weight as a wet signature?
Yeah, pretty much. I still see a little bit, particularly in Asia, a few countries still pushing for it, but I think COVID's kind of pushing them over the edge now. It's even they can't say, okay, we can't ship FedEx things around the world, and it's just impossible, especially if you have an NDA where you need a bunch of participant signatures on it. If you need 10 signatures, it's going to take 3 months to get a signature around the world. So we can do that in 5 hours now.
I was reading that in Asia they use a chop. Is that still? Can you do that electronically? Does Adobe Sign have it?
Actually, can. Yeah, we've started doing that with DocuSign. There's a legal stamp or chop in here.
So Todd, well, that's good to know as well. So if you are in the market for a contract management system, how should you go about selecting one? How did you go about selecting a system, and why did you end up choosing Agiloft?
Yeah, we're really focused on user friendliness. My boss, when I first started talking about trying to justify doing this, had a more complicated system that no one ended up using in the end. So we took a lot of time up front determining what we wanted, use some consultants, probably like what Ellen does, and go through, what do we want? You might want to copy what process you have in place now, but the contract management system also gives you a lot of different options, using templates and things like that automatically that you didn't have an option to before. We also want something that's very flexible, that we could change ourselves. A lot of the systems out there, you have to go to a consultant to make any type of change. We didn't want that. There's always going to be some of that, but really going with Agiloft was good because at this point, it's been a couple of years now, we know what to do for 90% of the stuff, and we can make a little change of language here and there and add new templates and things like that by ourselves, which is nice. Security, at the time, we wanted to have an on-premise system, which Agiloft offers. I'm not sure if I'd go that route these days, just because I think it's easier. The cloud is pretty secure these days, and maybe more secure than some companies' internal security processes. But that at the time, we want to make sure our customers' information and our own information and IP is very well locked down. Ability to integrate with our current and future systems. We wanted something future-proof. So if we want to tie into SAP in the future, which is our ERP system, we could do that. If we want to tie into whatever supply chain is using for their PO system, we could integrate into that. So that's an option. Electronic signatures, obviously, we talked about, but that was very key. We've automated our basic NDAs. Legal doesn't touch them now. They're pre-signed. They're pushed to our suppliers using DocuSign, and as long as no changes are requested, it's all automatic. It's all uploaded back into DocuSign. Back into AgileOffice automatically, which saves us a lot of time. We looked at a lot of systems, some bigger, some smaller. I think the bigger ones are more difficult. You can customize them, but it takes many consultants and many implementers to make that happen, to tie it into all your other systems. Some of the smaller ones are not very flexible. You get what you get, and it's probably just online, and we weren't able to customize it the way we wanted. So we found AgileOffice was kind of the best value of what we needed, in terms of flexibility, what we wanted, needs versus wants, but it turned out to be a good thing.
So how long did that process take in terms of looking for a system? Did you spend weeks, months, years?
Months, definitely. You think it's going to take, maybe a couple months. It takes a lot more than that, I think, in the end. We planned a lot before we even, started implementing or even selecting a supplier. But it does take a long time to, you start small. You want to make sure everything works before you roll it out to the whole company. We wanted to be very careful. So it took us all probably a year from start to finish, make sure everything worked right, make sure all the single sign-on works all right around the globe, make sure everyone could get an NDA when they needed it, and then kind of improve from there.
Great, thanks. So Ellen, what do you advise your clients who are in the market for a CLM system?
Yeah, well, and even some who maybe aren't, but I think that the important starting point is that you do need to be thinking about digitization of contracts. So to the extent that you're thinking like, oh yeah, maybe it's not quite the time, it really is the time, because I think that this is, COVID has been an obvious obstacle, right, that we've all had to face with remote, and it's opened up a lot of holes in the system, and they may subside in 6 months or a year, and you may find yourself more in a standard office environment, but I don't think this is the last we'll see. So I think for those who are still on the fence about whether or not you do need a contract lifecycle management tool, you do. And as lawyers, we're compelled under the Model Rules of Ethics to even be making sure that we're integrating technology into our daily workplace. So that's kind of the first starting point of conversation, is really making sure people understand that this is not just a pandemic response that's going to go away. This is something that just is changing how contracts work, right? This is the things you can do with a contract tool are impossible otherwise, and just most companies have way too many to manage that manually. From there, similar to the AMLA 100 firm's advice on find your contract, that's the first question, is where are your contracts? Do you know where they all are? And even if you have a contract lifecycle tool and you're just listening in here to maybe get some tips on how to use it better, again, are all your contracts in that solution as well, right? Because it's about adoption. So you can have the best contract lifecycle tool in place, but if you do not have all your contracts there, it's really not doing you the service that it could. So, really critically think. I always ask my clients, I want you to think of any possible place that's a contract. Is it desktop? Is it in someone's file drawer? Is it on a network drive? How many places are there? And depending on how difficult that is to answer that question, that's your starting point, is getting a tool and getting all your contracts in one central place. If you've got that under control, I mean, there's a lot of other things you can consider. Todd talked about, whether you want a customized solution or one that you can work yourself, and how complicated does it need to be. And I think for most departments starting out, just a real honest look at your department. Are you super technologically savvy? If you really don't know where all the contracts are, starting there with just a really good tool that can grow with you, getting the basic workflow in place, that's where you want to start. You can add all of the bells and whistles later, but you really just want to get it all in one place so you can fully see all the contractual obligations of the company, and then you can begin to do the fun work of standardizing language like Todd said. I feel like this pandemic has been such an unsung, or maybe that's not the right way to say it, but just such a tribute to all of those clauses in the contract where you're like, we'll never need that force majeure clause. That's just kind of there as a catch-all, right?
Yeah.
Some of those other contract clauses that like you never think you're going to have to rely on. And so just getting everything in one place and having the visibility to see what's possible. And now I think we all have our eyes a little more open about, what we do need to be prepared to face as a business. That's important. So I guess that really the point of all of that is neatly summed up to say, don't overcomplicate it. I mean, it can be a very complicated thing. And if you're looking at technology, there's so much that it can do. And just really do not be afraid to start with the basics and nail those basics and get everyone using that tool. So if you start with just really simple workflows that get the job done to get your contracts in one place with standard language, where the approvals are all in one place to help with audit purposes, and you've got that e-signature so no one's having to really even complicate that piece of it, you will be amazed at what that can produce for results in terms of minimizing risk and just making life easier for everyone where contracts are involved.
Great, thanks, Ellen. So also, Todd mentioned it a little bit. I just wanted to ask about adoption as well. Like you said, you can have the best tool in the world and you can get all your contracts in there, but if people don't use it, then it's not a great system. So what are some of sort of the lessons learned for adoption from your clients, Ellen?
Yeah, so it starts with the executive level, having just very clear support from the top that this is something we're doing. We expect everyone to use it. And I just actually read an article this morning touching on this, and I was speaking with a client last week and it touched on this, but have the executives use the tool also, right? If they're putting their contract request through there, and then they can say with confidence to the rest of the organization, I can do it, you can do it, we're all doing it. That is how you win, and getting people excited about it. I think there's so many things that can be gained, and just having the chance to work through with people to help them understand where this will really change their workload and simplify things, and then showing them that when the tool's in place is really helpful as well. So you need that top-down buy-in, and it helps generate excitement as well.
So great. Todd, do you want to add anything on the adoption front?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, executives usually want us to do it for them, and we kind of force them to go through the process too, because like you said, it trickles down the line to their reports, and they'll say, it's easy, go ahead and do it, just submit an NDA request and do it. It's adopting. I think we did a lot of training in our system. Every time we do training, we learn more and more, and we tweak things to make it easier for the end users to use. I mean, you can have all the bells and whistles on your interface that legal is using, but keep it very simple and clean, and on the end user interface that the employees are using, and make it, click here for an NDA, one or two options, and that's it. Don't make it overly complicated. There's a lot of things you can do up front, and especially in the beginning, just keep it simple and make sure it all works for a few months before you add the next fancy feature that is available.
So even before adoption, though, you have to implement the system. I think you alluded a little bit to it, that some systems need to be a little bit more. You need to have, it's sort of like a Goldilocks, right? You got to get the one that's flexible enough but not too complex. So what was your experience with implementing AgileOft, and maybe give us an idea of what contract management system looks like in your organization?
Yeah, I mean, like I think I said before, you need to spend a good deal of time just determining what you really want in the system. When you start looking at your wants and your needs for what you want in the system, there's a lot of wants, but you should really focus on a few needs, especially in the beginning for the first year or so. Yeah, you could do AI immediately, which everybody's pushing right now, but yeah, what's involved in that, it's probably too big to tackle at the beginning. So keep it simple, use templates, make them as simple as possible, and the user interface as simple as possible. Like I said, we started with NDAs, huge volume of contracts, impacts most of the employees in the company, which gives everybody experience with the contract management system, so you can add stuff later. And make sure the system works before you start rolling out all the other contracts that you want to add to the system or other features that you want to add to the system. Make sure it works day in, day out, and you don't have a bunch of complaints. And once people don't think it works, they stop using it, and it's hard to get them to start using it again, even with management push. Transferring contracts from your old database or whatever system you have in place, might just be a file folder somewhere. It's not easy. I think it was a little bit easier than I thought it would be, but it takes a lot of time to go through, make sure, especially the metadata, make sure it makes sense, make sure that it transfers over to what you want to track in the new database. It takes a lot of time just data mapping what's in there. I've been at ASM a long time, so I kind of understood most of the contracts. I think that helped, but it took a lot of my time just to make sure that things transferred into the right bucket of contract types and things like that. Make it user-friendly. I keep saying that over and over again. It prevents mistakes. We kind of took what came out of the box at Agiloft and put a lot of detailed instructions in the system itself. Step-by-step instructions. Do this, do that, push this. That helps a lot. We do that, take screenshots of everything, provide that in training, provide that in procedures, so it's all the information is the same when we show them how to do something. Extensive user training is very important. You get used to using the system all the time when you're launching it and implementing it yourself, but people don't understand, where do I go, where do I do this and that, and so the user training, you get a lot of feedback before you start, find 5 or 6 users, around the globe in different departments, make sure they can actually use the system, make sure they understand it and are comfortable with it before you start training the rest of the world about it. One thing we're still basically implementing it to this day. I mean, it's been 4 years. We're still, I still have a huge list of things I want to do with the system, neat things. So we have a weekly meeting with our implementation team, the guy that helped us from the beginning. It's just an hour a week, and we find it's worth that money. It's not that much, and it helps us. Can we do this? Can we do that? And 95% of the time, yeah, we can. Maybe we don't want to after we talk to them. Maybe we do. But it really helps us as we learn the system ourselves, but to bounce things off the Agiloft experts.
So Todd, you implemented the system when the world was normal, so to speak. Have there been any lessons learned with everything going to remote? Your global organization and everybody now globally is working from home, I'm assuming.
Yeah. Most of the professional people are working at home these days. I think lessons learned. Yeah, I mean, I think we're pretty happy with how things are going. We've found out that the internal approval process using DocuSign and Agiloft is very important with the lockdown. Execs are everywhere. We can't just go down the hall anymore and knock on their door to get something signed. It's really critical that everything be done offline and online and in electronic fashion these days.
Right. So Ellen, same thing, implementation, it's so important. What do you what do your clients see? What do you advise them in terms of implementation?
So just I'll build on a few things that Todd said that I think are really important, but it is an evolving process, right? So it is, planning is critical. So have a plan when you go in, but also recognize that like you're going to need to change that plan, and that's okay. I'm not saying change your core function that you've decided that you needed, but the plan is likely going to evolve. And it's not just a one-time, let's get it implemented and that's the end of the road. Because businesses evolve, because your needs evolve, because you really want to get something working simply at first and then add additional functionality to it. To Todd's point, it's an ongoing process. And that shouldn't be scary. It just actually shows, I think, the flexibility of your organization to recognize we want to make sure that as things and our needs are changing, that we are advancing what we can do from a technology perspective to really get the most out of our solutions. So it's not just going to be a one-time finite thing. It is going to be something that you're going to circle back to. Some clients every 6 months kind of do a check-in, right? Hey, it's been running for 6 months. What do we like? What don't we like? What feedback have we heard? And then they just evaluate at that cadence. So it looks a little bit different, but just I think have that expectation. And then the other piece too with that is also it's going to take time. And I think that, and Todd, I'd be curious what your experience is, but it's probably going to take more time than you expected. And so whomever is going to be kind of the boots on the ground, one, really leading the implementation, doing the work in the system to get things set up and configured, make sure that they're supported in that. So maybe removing other projects off their plate, but just knowing that it is going to take time and it's not magic. I wish that it were. It's worth the effort and time, but you do have to have that. It can't just be a quick thing that's happening, 15 minutes here and there. It's going to take dedicated project time to get that done. So have a resource or two that can be devoted in that way. And I think that will save a lot of headache too. Just, you can always get time back, but it's harder to make time if you haven't planned for that with these implementation projects.
Yeah, so thanks, Ellen. One of the things that I would add is that since you started implementing 4 years ago, one thing that's really advanced is AI, and a lot of companies will have, millions of contracts, literally, hundreds of thousands of contracts if you're a big corporation. And one of the big pain points is how do you get all those contracts, which are usually stored in people's desktops, file folders, etc. How do you get them all into one place and organized in a central repository? And AI has really made that a lot more, a lot easier. So that's one thing that we've seen with our enterprise clients is that those advancements in natural language processing have really taken a lot of the pain out of the implementation process. You still have to do a lot of planning, how do you want to categorize the documents, etc. So just something to keep in mind when you're choosing a vendor.
And I think to the point too, Hero, it's important to do the work to get that data in up front as well, and to get it in using the AI so that it's clean and workable. I think it can feel like we'll just deal with that later. Let's just start fresh and get going. But the value you can have by getting that data in a usable format up front, it's so much easier than either putting nothing in or putting in kind of messy data that you're going to come back to. There's never enough time to come back to it. So I also encourage folks to just do the hard work during the implementation phase.
So another question I have is that a lot of people maybe find this to be something that they want. They want a CLM system. Well, how do you make the business case? It's a time of cost cutting, cash conservation, etc.
Yeah, I mean, we fought for a long time to get it, of course, as always have to. We really compared the number of support employees that we'd have to have. We kept having more and more contracts, and we'd have to hire paralegals or other admin type people to keep track of all that. It probably wouldn't be it's still pretty tough to do just with people, no matter what you do. Like I said, I mean, it frees up the attorneys to do more value-added tasks. We really emphasize that to especially our upper management. I mean, there are things that we're doing nowadays that we just didn't have time to do before because we're tracking NDAs every second. We have employees emailing us every, multiple times a day just to see if there's an NDA already with the supplier, and now they can just go onto the system and do that themselves. It's not something an attorney should be doing. And we really focused on, the user experience. Our old databases, we had, a license for the legal people, but nobody else. So no one else could get into the system. No one else could see which contracts they have with their suppliers and things like that. So it's really, time savings. It makes a lot of problems go away. I mean, internal audits and things like that. Things we would spend a month on in the past takes maybe a week now or something like that. We can just point them in the right direction, and it really helps to do that. So it really, focused, especially in upper management, on the things we can do to improve compliance, reduce risk by having these, templates that are consistent and have the right clauses in them and the right versions in them. We used to have, multiple versions that might be 10 years old. People are still using them because no one told them to do something else. Now we have a single point of contact. Go to Agiloft, that's where you get your contract. Yeah, no exceptions.
So Ellen, how are your clients making the business case? I know that legal departments typically, they don't spend a ton of money on technology, right? Todd, maybe you could chime in on that. They spend it all on the highly paid lawyers.
Compared to all the other departments, our cost spend is nothing compared to keeping sales and everything else going. So it's nothing.
Yeah. It is increasing, though, I will say. I feel like I have to confess at this point, too, that I spent many years in sales for legal technology, too. So a lot of years helping legal departments make the case for technology. And as we've seen the rise of the legal operations function in corporate legal departments, that technology budget is increasing, too, because now with your legal ops folks, you've got a dedicated core of people who are striving to help the department be more effective and more efficient, and they need the technology tools to do that. It's still a struggle for budget, for sure. And I think if you've read any article on how to make a business case, the nuts and bolts are there, right? You've got your hard savings and you've got your soft savings, and you can quantify time and employees and all of that. And really the thing I'll add to that, is that with anyone, whoever you're taking this to for approval, right, they've got a thing. They've got a thing that's their thing. Maybe it is not wanting to hire more employees, or maybe it's that it has to be hard dollar savings. But there's something in particular I have found in anyone who's approving these budgets, that they have a particular hot button issue that really gets them excited about, yes, that is the tool we need to save money, right? And maybe it's your general counsel that's got to give you the green light to use budget. Maybe it's a CFO, but get to know your people, get to know your department, get to know those people who are holding the purse strings for you, and understand how they like it, right? Do they need a PowerPoint presentation? Do they need hard numbers, an Excel file? But the more you can present your case in a way that speaks their language, the more effective I've seen, or the more successful I've seen departments be in actually getting that budget approved. And that's not trying to be sneaky at all. It's just understanding there are actual savings that the technology can provide. And so now you're just putting it in language that is clear and compelling for your audience, which is what lawyers do at trial. So it should be very natural. You can think of it a bit like that. It's your closing argument, right? And you would certainly not show up for that without doing preparation. So treat your budget requests and your business case in that same way.
Never underestimate a disaster that happens at your company either, and take advantage of that.
Yes.
If someone signed a contract that they shouldn't have, and the CEO found out about it, that's a good thing. We need better controls in place. We need better risk compliance. We need legal review. It's the basics. And if you can get one of the higher ups to understand that and say, oh, if we have this, we spend a little bit of money, but we'll protect you guys and the risk of the company I think that's a good selling point to push it over the edge.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that, it's actually interesting that you bring up risk as well, Todd. So one of the things we have at Agiloft is we do have an ROI calculator that's based on a lot of industry research that shows how much savings you can get in different areas. So I think we also surveyed our customers in addition to the sort of research from Gartner, IDC, et cetera. And I think we found with our customer base that you could save, or in general, our customers saved about 12% on procurement practices, so vendor management, things like that. They save 20% on legal operations, so basically that translates to attorney time. I think an IACCM study said that companies can save about 9% on revenue leakage. So those are actually huge numbers. If you think about if you're a $500 million company in revenue, 9% of that is, I'm not going to do the math and go, let's say that's $5 million. That pays for a system many times over. But I wanted to say, interestingly though, having said all that, the reason that our customers overwhelmingly said they put in place a system was what you just said, Todd, which was to minimize risk. Compliance and risk were the biggest reason they put in a CLM system. So I guess that's on your mind as well. So that's interesting. Okay, so speaking of security, how do you limit access to contracts in the system? Because these are sensitive documents, right?
Yeah, we kind of, in our case, we kind of grouped them into supplier agreements and customer agreements. Supplier agreements, more access. Customer agreements, pretty much locked down to people who really need to know what that customer is doing. We don't want, people supporting one customer telling the people supporting the other customer what's going on for competitive reasons. By default, we just kind of lock down. Everybody can join the system when they join ASM. They're automatically put into the system, so that's easy. But by default, we really limit them to supplier NDAs, for instance. That's all they can do. They can see whatever contracts they make, and they can see the supplier NDAs. But if we have some fancy agreement with the customer, they don't get to see that unless legal lets them to do that. And as we go along, we put limits on departments and things like that, so IT can see what contracts they need to see, and limited access to other groups. So it's worked out pretty well.
Great, thanks, Todd. So I'm just going to pause for a second here and see if anybody in the audience has a question or would like to raise their hand and chime in. I'll just give that a second here. Feel free to do that. We want it to be interactive, and we've been droning on for, 45 minutes or so. So while we wait for that, Todd, have you improved your system with increases in business volume, the number of attorneys in the legal system?
Yeah, we're really focusing on, start with the small contracts. But we've been adding more and more templates over the years, consulting agreements, purchase agreements, things like that. Adding more and more automation to kind of address repetitive issues that happen. Pushing to automate the approval process we have at ASM. So people don't have to dig up forms all the time. The right form is always attached to the contract that you're trying to do. Things like that. So a lot of small changes, some bigger changes. One thing we do is we have one contracts email, basically contracts@asm.com we have, which automatically captures all the emails related to contracts. that allows us all around the globe to kind of have an eye on what's happening. Make sure you kind of see things go through your email box. And if it's something that's important to you, you see something's happening with that. Maybe it's another attorney in Singapore or Japan that's dealing with that. But you always have the visibility of what's happening in the system. By using an email address like that, one email address, also all the red lines and all the emails related to each contract type are automatically uploaded in Agilop, which is, saves us a lot of time. It's, you can see, did someone else respond to this just by checking the contract record in Agilop. And all the red lines are always there. So it's, if everything goes right, not always, but then you have all the red lines, documented and archived in Agilop, and not just in someone's laptop. And one thing we've seen lately is with COVID, it's we've really had to delegate more across the globe. Instead of just me or somebody else doing all the contracts around the world, we have more attorneys. We have to delegate each type of contract or each regional contracts, and we tag that in Agilop too, just so if I know that this attorney in Singapore is responsible for this contract, I know who to go to, and the support staff knows who to go to, and even the end users, the employees know who to go to if they have a question on how to renew something or something like that. So that's helped us quite a bit.
Great.
I would just add to that, Ted, too. I mean, that really helps reduce risk as well, having that central contracts email. So you have a process that's dependent on a person, and that person is out sick or leaves the company, and then it's like, how do we get into their inbox, or how do we replace them in the system? There's a lot of good things to do. I've heard other clients using user groups. They're creating groups, email groups, that helps as well. But the nice thing about a CLM tool is then you're not person dependent. It's running on the process, and that keeps things going.
Right. So so in Agilop, you just set up the alternate approver, or so if somebody's out, it automatically goes to the next person in line, or automatic escalations and notifications, I guess. So one question, sort of the $1 million question, well, maybe it's not quite $1 million, but is how much does a typical CLM system cost, and how are they priced? So I'll sort of, I'll answer that from a vendor perspective. They can range from free to hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe not $1 million unless you're a Fortune 10 company. And it all depends on a number of factors. How many legacy contracts and documents need to be migrated, what system you're using to migrate. Like I said, AI has made that process easier. How complex are your workflows and business processes? Todd has a international organization with multiple rules, jurisdictions, etc. How well documented are they? How available and effective is your team? The more work your team does, the less it's going to cost. How much regulation is your company subject to? If you're a pharma company operating in 20 different countries in the world, you might have more regulatory scrutiny. On the vendor side, how many vendors, partners, subcontractors do you have? How many different geographies do you operate in? Etc. So there's a bunch of stuff that goes into it. But if your needs are relatively simple and you're willing to do a little legwork, you can literally install a system that works for you at little or no cost, and then sort of build from there. I think the important thing, Ellen said it earlier, is to get your contracts into an electronic repository. When choosing a CRM system, I guess the one thing I would suggest you make sure of is that you choose a system that will scale as you grow, so that so there's nothing wrong with picking or starting small, but make sure the system has the ability to grow with you, because you don't want to be in a position of having to manually transfer thousands of documents into a new system just when you've got everybody using the old system. Would you add anything to that, Ellen? I'll start with you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the scalability piece is important for sure. And there are definitely, you can resources out there. The Gartner's Critical Capabilities Report would be a nice one to read through to understand what systems can do and what ones do things well. And that also ranks on price. So to the price piece, speaking, words are failing me now, but speaking on the price question, that's a good starting point to just look at the land. I mean, there's over 200 vendors out there, I think, that do some form of contract management. You do not have the kind of time to be going through 200 to figure out which one's best. So looking at resources like that, considering price and scalability, and going back to the idea of having a plan. Todd mentioned your wants versus your needs. Identifying your needs, so these are things that any system that you would choose has to have. And then the wants, how many of those wants do they have from that future scalability perspective, and just having that in your mind before you start looking at solutions can be helpful as well.
Todd?
Yeah, I think it would help, like the wants and needs, get what you need at the beginning, but if there's, if the system is capable of doing some of your wants in the future, that's great. I mean, that's, you want a contract library, you want something, or you want AI in the future. If it's capable of doing that, then you don't have to restart over with a new system later on. We've, after a couple of years, and we've had even, departments, HR is starting to use our system by themselves. It's nice. We can just, buy a few more licenses for them. They can do employment contracts by themselves in the system. So it's not even, it's still a legal system, but we're able to help other groups kind of expand and do things that as people are exposed to the system, they go, oh, well, we could automate this, we could automate that. So it's kind of nice if you have that capability to add on later on.
Yeah, I think the whole digital transformation thing is really helping the adoption of contract management systems. I read that Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, said that the COVID situation has really accelerated 2 years of digital transformation into 2 months, and I think we're sort of seeing that in the legal tech arena as well. So on that front, who typically, in your experience, and I'll start with you, Ellen, is responsible for implementing a system like contract management in organizations? Is it IT, or do you think is it the legal department that sort of takes the lead in it?
Yeah, I would actually encourage it to be the legal department. Not that you won't need IT's help, but IT is not likely going to understand in the way that legal does what the problems are and what you need. And so you have to have someone in legal at the table who can speak to the business process and understands really what problem you're solving and what the goal is, to really advocate for legal. To the extent that departments have legal operations teams or person, that's who we're seeing. That's again, their role is to come in and really help have effective operations for legal support. And a lot of that is can be with technology. There's a lot more that they do beyond just technology, but that is often what we're seeing. For smaller departments where you don't have a legal operations person, you might have a key contracts, an attorney who's leading contracts, or a paralegal who's leading contracts, or a contract program manager, maybe someone who's not even traditionally legal that can lead it. But having someone, again, who knows the contract process, or who knows the answers to the contract process, that's going to be your most effective way for implementation. So it doesn't have to be a certain title or a certain role, but it's the person at the organization who most closely knows your contract process, and who also can have time to get it done.
So Todd, in your case, how involved was IT? Or were there other departments involved?
Yeah, I mean, what else says is, yeah, totally correct. I mean, it was really legal pushing it. It's really legal, doing the implementation. IT is, of course, an important partner, especially, multinational organization with servers around the world. We had to make sure that, everything works, single sign-on, the emails going back and forth and things like that. Of course, you have to work with IT. But what you want in the system is very important, and I mean, part of the planning phase in the beginning is talking to all the different departments. I mean, procurement and sales probably the biggest one, but a number of other groups just to kind of see what they need. What type of contracts do they do day in, day out? Can they easily be made into templates? Can they easily be standardized? And automated, and how would that help them? So it's it's a global. It impacts everybody in the company, all the different departments. There's always a few key users out there that you want to make sure you really talk to. The operational people of each group in our system. We don't have a legal operations. I think it's me these days, but you need to talk to those people and see what they need.
So it's interesting that you mentioned that, because a lot of times contract management starts in a department, whether it's legal, whether it's procurement, or in some cases sales ops, and then it sort of becomes an enterprise level system. And what we're seeing more recently is that enterprises are taking a more holistic view, and they're looking at systems that maybe will become an enterprise CLM system. So I think that's one of the conclusions that Gartner came to in its report, where they said, I think the statistic was 85% of enterprises today don't have an enterprise level CLM system, and they expect that number to go to 90% will have an enterprise CLM system by 2023. So I don't know if that's going to happen, but that's a pretty big flip. So in terms of digital transformation, I think that's interesting. Oh, we are already in the Q&A session. So I'll just give a last chance for any attendee to ask a question. Otherwise, I think we're coming to the end of our time. Is that right, Marcio? Or do we have more time?
Yes.
That's correct. Okay. All right. Any parting words, Ellen? Todd?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I would just say to everybody, thank you for joining us. Just a quick plug, Agiloft is a contract management system vendor. You can visit our website at www.agiloft.com. I would encourage you to read the reports that Ellen mentioned. Gartner put out a critical capabilities report for contract management software. They also put out a Magic Quadrant for contract management software. You can get those at our site. We promise we're not going to make it hard in terms of filling out a form or anything like that. You can also contact us through GCC or directly. I'll give you my email address is hero.natani@agiloft.com, and the website again is www.agiloft.com. Thanks everyone for joining, and thanks to Ellen and Todd for extraordinary job on the panel.
Thanks, sir.
Thanks, Hero.
All right, thanks.